In a small village nestled between rolling hills and thick, whispering woods, there lived an old baker named Elias. His bakery was more than just a place where bread was made, it was a sanctuary of warmth, where the rich scent of fresh-baked loaves mingled with the laughter of neighbors and the comfort of shared stories. Elias was not a rich man, nor did he ever dream of being one. He had inherited the bakery from his father, a man who believed that true wealth came not from gold, but from the good one did in the world. And so, Elias spent his days waking before dawn, crafting bread from the finest flour, adding a touch of honey and a sprinkle of care into every batch. One winter, when the air was bitter and the streets of the village were blanketed in frost, a new family arrived in town. They were poor and weary, having traveled from a distant land in search of a better life. The mother, Maria, was frail, and the father, Thomas, looked as though the weight of the world had fallen upon him. They brought with them a young girl named Lila, whose bright eyes held the hope of a brighter future. Elias noticed them the day they stepped into the village, their hands wrapped in old, tattered coats. And when Lila's eyes lingered on the bakery, her face lighting up at the sight of warm bread in the window, Elias felt a pang of something deep in his heart, something between sorrow and determination. That evening, Elias decided to bake more than just his usual bread. He worked late into the night, kneading dough and shaping loaves, whispering stories of his father's days as he worked. When dawn painted the sky with strokes of gold, Elias placed a fresh batch of bread into a basket and wrapped it in a cloth as white as snow. The next morning, Elias waited until the village was awake and bustling, then quietly walked to the small house where Thomas and Maria lived. He knocked lightly on their door, and when Thomas answered, surprised, Elias said, "I thought your family might need a little warmth this morning." Thomas looked down at the basket, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Because I know what it is like to start over," Elias said, "and I know what it means to find kindness in unexpected places." Days turned into weeks, and Elias continued to visit, leaving bread and sometimes even a warm stew on their doorstep. He never spoke of it to anyone, and he never sought thanks or recognition. Yet, word of his generosity began to spread, touching the hearts of villagers who felt inspired by the story of the baker who had given without asking for anything in return. Lila began to smile more, her cheeks flashed with life as she played with other children in the village. Maria grew stronger, her laugh ringing out like music when she worked alongside Thomas, helping to mend their new home. And Thomas, who had once felt the weight of failure pressing down on him, found hope again, thanks to the kindness that had been offered without condition. One winter evening, as the village was gathering for the Festival of Lights, Thomas approached Elias, who was closing up the bakery for the night. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, wooden carving, a loaf of bread with a tiny heart carved into it. "Thank you," Thomas said, his voice soft, "for showing me that even in the darkest times, there is always light to be found." Elias looked at the carving, his heart full, and smiled. "It was never about what I gave," he said. "It was about what you gave back to me, the reminder that kindness is the most powerful thing of all." Years later, when Elias was long gone, the village still spoke of the baker who had given so much, not just in bread, but in love. And in that village, the lesson of the baker lived on, that even the smallest act of kindness can turn a stranger into a brother and a hardship into hope. And so, the story of Elias and his bread was passed from one generation to the next, a story of humility, compassion, and the simple truth that a little kindness can change everything.